He's an emeritus professor of physics and president's advisor of the Tianjin University NUS Joint Institution, Fuzhou, China. Now, Prof. Lai always give me the impression he is something like a walking encyclopedia. The way I put it this way, because whenever we have problem, we will approach him. He may not give us the answer directly, but at least he will point us to the right direction to get the answers. So other than he is doing as a professor, but he's have a lot of experience in the administrative work. Among the academic administrative responsibility, he was the head of the Department of Computational Science and the Department of Physics, and the Dean of Faculty of Science, Vice Provost of NUS, and Executive Vice President of the Yale NUS College. So without further ado, let's welcome Professor Lai to present his understanding or disruption of education.
This also work, right? Okay, thank you very much. Let me say, well, the very first slide is already wrong. All right? One of my professors used to say that you are never ready for a presentation until the moment you step onto the podium. Looking at this presentation slides this morning, then I realized that I should actually start off with bullet point number 3. I'm neither an AI researcher nor educationist. I'm an educator, and there's a lot of difference between an educationist and an educator. And neither have I extensive experience, whether in the form of experimentation or exploration, with ChatGPT, all right? And precisely because of that, then we go back into the first declaration that says that nothing in this presentation is actually original, all right? To some extent, much of this is my digestion of all the information that's already available about ChatGPT in education. And ChatGPT did not write this presentation, right? And after I have written down this sentence and I thought a little bit more about it, it could just as well have been generated by ChatGPT, right? Well, then why am I standing in front of you right now? Okay. Well, I think that one of the hope is that by agreeing to this public humiliation of my lack of knowledge, I hope that we could, in principle, stir up some thoughts to stimulate some discussions and the process, the pros and cons of ChatGPT, or for that matter, generative AI at this time and era, to figure out, more importantly, how we can actually deal with technological developments in education in general. Well, there's been quite a bit of concern about, the appearance of ChatGPT or other forms of generative AI, both within the general public as well as in the education community. Indeed, even the professionals are worried about the uncertain future of ChatGPT. And more generally, artificial intelligence could bring about. All right, and we have read about the news about, Geoffrey Hinton, who is considered by many as the godfather of AI, left Google over the concerns of misinformation. And he thinks that the dangers of chatbots are quite scary, and that the technology could be exploited by bad actors. Now, this sentence, however, hits right at the heart of new technologies in general. Right? Their use could be a two-sided sword that cuts both ways. The uncertainty has prompted many to proclaim the appearance of ChatGPT as the Oppenheimer moment, right? After the atomic bombs during the Second World War days, and even the director of the recent movie Oppenheimer, if you haven't seen it, you should. okay, this year, indeed emphasized the need to be accountable for the tools that we have and the tools that we use in our daily lives. Well, more specifically, what is actually worrying the educational community? Right? This summarizes one of the most feared possibilities of using ChatGPT. Well, Sam Bowman, an AI researcher at NYU, New York University, actually in an interview proclaimed that, well, we built it, we train it, but we don't know what it's doing. This is fairly characteristic of many of the ongoing AI research, and that is also one of the reasons why I'm actually interested in asking the question, are there physical principles underlying all these machine learning processes? Okay, I think it's probably, I have to be very careful here, AI researchers around this, it is probably fair to say that, with what I have come to know about is that when a particular, say for example, artificial neural network being built for machine learning, only those that are successful in accomplishing certain tasks and accomplishing well are being announced. Those that didn't work, you and I wouldn't hear anything about them. So there is actually a danger, right? And all tools based on modern and new technologies obviously has inherently certain uncertainties about what it is actually doing for you. And ChatGPT obviously is not an exception. Well, so I will probably dance around a couple of these questions, particularly referring ChatGPT in education. I would like to say maybe just list out a couple of concerns and potential threats that we perceive in the educational arena. And more importantly, I think that we will have to shift our focus into how we actually use emerging technologies in education in general. Right? The blame shouldn't actually be on ChatGPT itself at the moment. And I would like to think that with every time we have seen technology appearing on the scene, there's opportunities that we can actually adopt, and use in our educational activities. Generative AI is no exception. And finally, I think that, with all these technologies appearing before us, there's also the possibility of looking forward, innovating in adapting and adopting the new technologies and in the form of various educational reforms, right? Things have changed tremendously even during my own lifetime. Right? As a student, I grew up reading handwritten notes by professors, okay, reading textbooks that were few at that time, okay, graduating from underlining with pencils to highlighters, different colored pencils, etc., writing in the margins of books, etc. People don't do that anymore, okay? Whiteboard appearance, presentation slides, etc., have actually become very much part of our life as an educator. So maybe we can take a look and say, well, maybe this is a time for us to look for some of these possibilities. One major thing that immediately came into, in particular, the physics education scene, since I'm a physicist, I have been more sensitive to some of the comments coming from the physics community. This is from journal, American Journal of Physics, fairly recently, in August, just not too long ago. Right? It says, it suddenly becomes possible for students to recruit the assistance of a sophisticated AI language model with only a computer and an internet connection. In fact, the author went on to conclude that many of our students did just that, prompting questions about academic integrity and the use of AI in the classroom. Right? That's probably the problem. Well, this is indeed a valid concern, but I think putting the blame entirely on ChatGPT is not necessarily fair. The truth is, the learning attitudes of students today have changed. Education is often considered as nothing more than just completing a course or a degree program. Knowledge is no longer looked upon as cumulative or being built up, and the fashionable phrase is just in time. I will talk a little bit more about that, the appearance of ChatGPT on, but I would like to say that ChatGPT is not the first time we encounter these kinds of academic integrity problems. Well, we mentioned a little bit about student writing using ChatGPT these days. All right, my own initial exploration with ChatGPT with particular concern about plagiarism is that the existing anti-plagiarism software, in my opinion, could easily filter or detect plagiarized pieces of writing, if not individually, but in a class of, say, 50, 60 essays being submitted. If all of them were written by ChatGPT, our anti-plagiarism software existing right now will detect quite a bit of similarities and repetitions among them, simply because ChatGPT has only so many ways of composing the same thing on the same topic here. Right? Furthermore, in my experience now, the perfectly grammatical and perhaps even artistic composition already raises an alarm. Well, the potential use of ChatGPT covers an enormous range, right? For the writing-intensive disciplines, but perhaps less so in the sciences. Automated generation of writing, obviously, is of concern to many disciplines that are writing-intensive, for example. Getting a summary of background research in an area that the student or researcher is embarking on, right? Again, yes, that is a net effect, but not necessarily a negative one, okay, at this point in time. Through ChatGPT, it is also possible to generate detailed feedback on human written texts. In other words, there have always been this communication or opinion that maybe the students should read each other's work before those works are being read by the professor or the teacher. Well, now you have one additional alternative, possibly having a background and an exposure simply because of data used to train them, than the professor, right? Possibly with the exception of sort of new results, immediate, urgent, generated results. And when presented with computers writing a computer code is fairly obvious. Right? You can there are only so many computer languages that are out there, but they are of very restricted and limited and rigid structures. So easily that can be gotten right. And to me, having spent quite a bit of my professional career in computational science, I'm not sure I'm against that. Somebody else writing the code for me, okay? And when presented with a specific problem, ChatGPT could also provide us with a solution. I say could, not necessarily the optimal, not necessarily the correct, not necessarily the most argued and balanced answer solution to the problem. Okay, so if I were to say, if I'm only looking at some of these items or potential uses of ChatGPT in the life of a student or an educator, not all bad, okay? Now, obviously, there are challenges. Not all things, okay? Oops, I'm sorry. There are challenges related to the use of ChatGPT in these concepts. First and foremost, wrong or incorrect sources could contribute to significant misinformation. Now, because ChatGPT actually learns or searches for available resources on a particular topic or problem, it is conceivable that it might take the most popular or most frequently presented information as definitive. And the sources that ChatGPT rely on to work are usually not in the scientific way of speaking filtered or validated for accuracy. And a rumor, for example, that are spreading extensively in social media could very well be taken as gospel truth and presented as an answer to a question. Again, this is not specific to ChatGPT. We humans too will have to exercise judgment on all the information that we access. Nevertheless, this is a serious concern. Another challenge is the built-in bias or prejudice that could exist in the sources that ChatGPT access. This has been raised earlier on by the two speakers. Not necessarily all sides of view, but possibly one dominates, and the reader is not necessarily given the opportunity to actually decide what is reasonable. Well, this could undermine the use of value of the use of ChatGPT, and detection of such bias and prejudice is not even easy with us humans, right? Much less with a machine. More philosophically, the use of AI in general is the question of integrity and ethics, and this is very commonly debated in the community of AI in general. Other than resonating with this concern, I really have very little or nothing at all to say anything further. Finally, there is also the question of equity and access, also raised by the previous speakers already. All right, and because ChatGPT is a natural language processing and has a natural language processing ancestry, it is questionable if the same framework can be extended to, say, languages that have less widespread use. An internet connection is requisite here, and it could also mean that the less privileged areas or nations in the world will not have access to this educational technology. This is going to be a very tricky. All right, so let us now look at, say, how have the education been playing a role in the world of education. If you look at ChatGPT as a new, possibly educational technology, it is probably reasonable to ask how this is different from what we have already and are using currently. Well, Google search in particular comes to mind. All information or knowledge we need is in the cloud or internet, the students would tell us. It's what most people think, and we search for the internet for key influences on the internet, the latest Korean pop groups, or topics like blockchain investment, symmetries in physics, latest vaccine developments and medical treatment, the history of Qing dynasty, or the archaeological digs in Egypt, etc., etc. Right? This is solidly established in all aspects of education, and we have taken it for granted. Right? ChatGPT is but a new kid on the block, but it's already getting the attention of IT giants like Wolfram Research, in particular, where whose alpha platform is touting computational intelligence with plugins with the GPT engine. Well, I specifically highlighted Wolfram because I first met Stephen Wolfram when he was 19 in Copenhagen. So he has come a long way. Now, how does Google search and ChatGPT compare, especially within the user's perspective? Well, there is, oops, wrong direction. All right, there is a fairly recent study, right, just this month or so, of trying to find out what's the difference between Google search and ChatGPT use. This is a controlled survey dividing groups of people. And the general conclusion is that ChatGPT generally spends less time, but with the caveat that, the overall task performance is not necessarily seen to be better, significantly better. And ChatGPT uses also across different educational levels things that ChatGPT excels in answering straightforward questions and providing general solutions, not very specific solutions, but falls short in fact-checking tasks. ChatGPT's responses also, for some reason, perceive as having higher information quality. Okay. And ChatGPT users often report better user experiences, useful, enjoyable, satisfying. Okay. Now, in many ways, all these observations, the results are not necessarily surprising. Not at all. For that matter, the later 2 points about it being seen as higher information quality, could it be just the language, right? Instead of having to go to searches. And the difference, obviously, between Google search, at least from our working experience, both as an educator and a researcher, is that I have to do a lot of filtering and digesting. But as Aaron has emphasized, the prerequisite obviously is also a fairly solid foundation in that particular discipline that you're looking at. Okay, and experience over the years help as in practicing the art, and that's also the reason why I have a little head start with my graduate students. They always take a little bit longer to actually get to the crux of the matter, whereas I could do that much easily and faster. Okay, so summary is that the key difference between ChatGPT and the search engine is that search engines typically do not retain an evolving history of an answer, but returns a list of discrete links to resources based on the ranking of specific search terms. Fair enough. That we already know for a long time. Okay? ChatGPT, however, offers one additional advantage in the sense that it offers follow-up questions that can develop and expand answers and respond to challenges posed by the questioner. It doesn't end in one stop. It can, in principle, be made to continue. In other words, the results obtained from the search engines requires further human scrutiny and filtering before the user can get a broad picture, basically. Right? Okay, and I think that the next point, obviously, is that, as educators, what do? Do we leave it to AI to decide for us how AI should be used or, dance around in the educational setting? The point is that just like technologies that we are taking for granted today, there's no way out of here. They're not going away anytime soon. So one of great American terms that I learned from my days in US, damn if you do, damn if you don't, but here, damned if we don't, right? Well, we need to take the technology in tow and massage it into some useful tools for us to do our job. And this will take efforts, lots of them as a matter of fact, but I don't think that we have any choice here. In a recent EduCourse quick poll, recently, EduCourse is a not-for-profit association that focuses on use of IT in higher education. And one of their quick polls pointed out that, well, look at it in bright side. ChatGPT actually can be used in quite a number of ways. One, they call dreaming, helping you think. This aspect includes brainstorming, getting unstuck, summary and synthesis of complex content, research and analysis, asking questions, and learning in the process. There's also take some drudgery in your working life out, lightening your load, basically using the technology in sending communications, drafting administrative documents or materials or report, reviewing and proofreading materials, grant, proposal, or contract writing, say, for example. And thirdly, design and building your content, like creating presentations and slides. Not this one, though. And other content, creating course materials, exams, syllabi, editing and creating images and video, suggesting prompts and materials for trainings and workshops. Some of this could be useful. Development and advancing your work, drafting department and institution policies, developing departmental institutional strategic plans, creating detailed project plans, or offering advanced scripting and coding. Well, after reading this, I have an immediate feeling. This seems to point to the fact that ChatGPT in principle can make my life easier. Does not necessarily make me a better teacher or an educator. Okay? So, yeah, well, maybe that is just one aspect of it. Well, I think that some of them we can look into what happened in those cases where people actually have used ChatGPT in the educational context, teaching with them. All right. One of them says that ChatGPT appears to perform well for structured tasks, but struggle with nuanced tasks. Very specific, but once you sort of make it a little bit less straightforward and obvious, ChatGPT could be stuck. Well, I can tell you two examples. One, apparently a journalist asked the ChatGPT and say, what are the three of the most remarkable pieces written by the guy, Clive Thompson? And he found that, continuing the discussion, ChatGPT invariably gets everything wrong. So he wrote a piece that says, you know nothing about my work, ChatGPT. Journalism in principle, right? I mean, it is ambiguous. What do you mean by most outstanding pieces? Most read, most commented, most criticized in many ways. And that also has something to do with the currency, immediacy of some of these pieces. Another piece of thing that I have read is from two physics researchers, teachers, that asked ChatGPT the following question. A teddy bear is thrown into the air. What is the acceleration on the teddy bear at its highest point? physicists, the answer probably comes, fairly immediately. Right? And unfortunately, I don't think that the two authors actually were very happy with the answers. And the paper is actually called ChatGPT and the Frustrated Socrates. Well, and the conclusion from these two investigators, as a matter of fact, were to say that, at least at this point in time, ChatGPT is not yet qualified as good enough to be used for cheating tool or as a tutor in physics. Well, since we brought up Socrates, one additional advantage of having ChatGPT is that actually you can actually do something through chatbots, say for example, right, a dialogue, that of learning through questions from the users and responses from ChatGPT, thereby in the process stimulating further follow-up questions through a sustained dialogue, one question after another, depending on how the responses are. This, in the educational context, would be interactive learning, right? Or the good old Socratic dialogue. This would, and strategic design and perhaps also the guidance of a teacher could possibly make this a very constructive and beneficial educational format. So, yeah, not always correct. You could, in principle, to the dialogue, do further filtering and argue the correctness of some of these answers. Well, confronted with this challenging technology, let me do a little bit of advertisement on my recent interests. All right, I would like to think, at least in my approach to machine learning and the physical principles underlying them, is that the system is actually driven by the training towards the age of chaos. Okay, and the age of chaos, according to chaos theory, is simply the transition zone of bounded stability, and engenders a constant dynamic interplay between order and disorder. The simple reason for this particular zone being so important is that stability, order is not interesting. After a while, you get tired. We don't want chaos either, right? Because we don't know how to handle it. But somewhere between these two, okay, you are no longer having that regularity that you're so accustomed to, and yet any small changes could lead to dramatic changes in what we do and how we behave. So, and I'm actually surprised that even in the early 2000s, this line of thinking, right, is already in the community of the psychologists and in the context of how creativity flourishes and how educational system could be looked upon as a complex adaptive system where the system actually reaps the greatest benefit from the age of chaos, the zone between order and chaos. So, well, I'm an optimist, and I do not think that the rise of AI in general and the appearance of ChatGPT in particular as the Oppenheimer moment, we can still make impactful changes to education if only we could face up to the challenges and make the new technology work for us rather than decide how we go about doing our education work. Right, thank you very much.
Okay, anyone, any questions? Then I have one question. Okay, always, I mean, I still remember maybe a couple of years ago when Singapore government saying that primary school students need to start learn coding. Now, one of the problem I heard is how to teach the teacher so that they can teach the kids to do coding. So in such a fast evolving era of generative AI, what can we do to the teachers so that they can know how to tackle this issue?
Well, I think this push for learning coding in schools actually came about from the by now not so fashionable notion of computational thinking in addition to critical thinking. Now, computational thinking actually came about in the 80s by computer scientists. In the 80s, the computers enrollment in the United States is all-time low. So it's got to find a way of sort of stimulating and encouraging students to go into computer science. And this lady who was at one time, well, who was a faculty member at Carnegie Mellon University, a chair of that, and then later on she went on to Microsoft, vice president for research, created this term called computational thinking. Right? To me, nothing in computational thinking is not in scientific thinking. Okay, verifying facts, decomposition of problems into smaller pieces, you handle them each at a time, and then before you tackle the bigger problems. And of course, the reusable code is do not reinvent the wheel, etc. Now, to me, yes, computational thinking, if I were to take it as meaning largely scientific thinking, being able to analyze critically problems and break them down into pieces that I can actually tackle, coding is one of the best ways of crystallizing such thinking, because computers do not speak English, right? And you cannot be ambiguous simply because every word in the computer programming language is translated into actual mechanical or electronic motion onto the machine. Okay? So you can't get it wrong, no ambiguity whatsoever. So if you are going to be able to actually appreciate the difficulty of a problem and realize it in the form of code that works, you have pretty much understood the step-by-step deduction of the towards the solution. So I can see that, right? But my argument that didn't end up very well for myself is that computational thinking is not computer programming. It's more than that. So at that time, I think that, just like you said, coding is being popularized. The university wanted to do coding as computational thinking. I said, no way. I ended up having to teach a course of 5 years to walk the talk.
Yeah. But now, with ChatGPT, how can we prepare the educator for that?
I don't know. This is, I largely think that this is not a matter of a technical training, right? Now, you can, in principle, take advantage of ChatGPT without having the knowledge of the speakers, two speakers that we, into the background and details. But you probably will have to be sensitive to some of these user experiences from the more, those people, those who come before you in experimenting with some of these users, and what are the shortcomings and concerns that you might have to bear in mind. And I think that anyone who's interested, if you are a teacher, you have a very specific goal ahead of you. I want to help my students to do this. They can easily, just in time learning, you can pick it up from anywhere you like. Of course, having said that, putting someone through a structured, training in a day or two has its advantages. Makes you cannot say, oh, I don't understand this step. I go tomorrow, search the net again.
Thank you. Anyone, any other questions for Prof. Lai? Oh, okay, thanks, Prof. Lai again. Thank you.